First, yeah, my honor. I might have muted I never turn my pack on. It's good to know I don't really need it that bad. Nope. This happens like once every couple months. I'm spreading them out a little better now. All right, so a couple things. You might feel like this is self-serving or whatever, but let me just say something that I didn't plan on saying. Man, if you have the time, ability, desire, pray for our kids. And specifically, and don't take this the wrong way, specifically the kids, Eleanor, Waylon, Ava, Eliza, Nora, Charlotte, because there's always a joke, the pastor's kids, they're the bad kids, But the thing about it is that they're in a weird situation because the church is the thing taking mom and dad away. And so for them to grow up loving Jesus, they have to be able to process that the church, that you guys are the thing taking mom and dad away. Does that make sense? And so if you could be with us and praying for our kids, that would be awesome and greatly appreciated. You'd never even know how much I appreciate it. It's just a thought. Fair enough. We pray for your kids too, so I'm not being selfish. Everybody good? Yeah. Here's the other thing. Christmas Eve. I didn't do this last service either. Christmas Eve. Okay, so Megan said something. She said that's a day that a lot of people are willing to come to church that they wouldn't be willing to come otherwise. Here's the deal, man. It's something that I don't always say as clearly as this. We should use those days purposefully. The church should be growing, and it shouldn't be growing so that we're building a big kingdom. It should be growing so that people know Jesus. And so days like Christmas Eve, Easter, Mother's Day, these days are important days because they're days that people are just more open to receive what the Holy Spirit has. And we should be serious about using those intentionally to try to reach people. Does that make sense? So let's not just look at Christmas Eve and be like, oh, it's one more thing I have to do. And let's not just look at Christmas Eve as something that's just for us. That's a day that we should be very intentional about trying to tell people, get them here and try to tell people about Jesus and because they'll be open to the conversation more so than other days. That makes sense. And the church should be growing. It should be growing because people come to know Jesus. And if it's not, then all we're really doing is caring about ourselves. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Jesus doesn't like that too much. So just another thought for you. This could be a wild ride, guys. I don't feel great. So we're going to see where this goes. All right, so we're going to be in Luke chapter 18, and then we're going to jump to 19 because the two stories kind of parallel each other. I'm going to start off by saying this. I think that a lot of times what we do when it comes to our own personal spiritual lives is we play the comparison game. Does this make sense? So you've probably done this before in your marriage, right? The comparison game. So y'all are going to have to help me out a little bit. All right, you've never done the comparison. Yeah, right. So the comparison game, for me, it gets really bad because I'm spoiled. So anytime Amanda is pregnant, she's tired, and she should be. She's growing a human, right? But you got to understand, I'm spoiled. The woman is super mom every other time of life. And I'm not just blowing smoke. I think she's late for church. So I don't even think she's here yet. So I'm not just blowing smoke. I'm not just trying to get brownie points. The deal is she throws down. I mean, we go to bed and the house is spotless and our kids are tornadoes. It's a job in and of itself. And then she does everything, everything in the house. And that's just kind of the way it is, except when she's pregnant, right? And so what happens when she's pregnant is me being spoiled. Anytime you get used to something, you take it for granted, right? And so then I start doing more stuff. And I don't complain about the doing more stuff. I get it. She doesn't feel good. I need to do more stuff. But here's where the problem comes into play. I do more things, and I do them poorly. And it's not because I don't try. I'm just not good at it. Like the dishes will be in the sink for a couple days, and it's because I don't see them. That literally happened this week. She was like, I've been cleaning for the last 3 days. You could have at least done the dishes. You were up late. And I was like, I'm sorry. I didn't notice them. Right? And so like the game starts getting played. I'm like trying to be on top of everything, trying to do everything. And by the way, like it doesn't go great. My kids for 3 months lived off of mac and cheese and peanut butter and jelly. And like that was, one day I packed their lunch and it was 2 cheese sticks, an apple, some grapes, and a bag of chips. And they're like, why'd you pack that for their lunch? And I was like, because they'll eat everything in that bag. I don't know. Like, I know they'll eat those things. I don't want to make something that gets thrown away. And so, like, that's the way it goes. And then when I start getting tired, and then I'm like, well, I've done all of this. What have you done? But she's growing a baby. But you start playing the comparison game, and it's dumb, right? But we do that in our spiritual lives. We'll be looking for God to move in our life. And then the next thing you know, we're comparing ourselves to other people. And it's like, well, why isn't it like that for me? And it's like, and then it leads to this place where like you get bitter with God, or you get bitter with yourself, or you don't feel like you're good enough, or you don't feel like, maybe you don't feel like he's good enough. And you just end up in this place, and it's this dumb game because we take certain things for granted, and because we think that somehow it's supposed to be exactly the same for me as it is for you. Right? And like that's like the biggest lie in all relationships, is that everything has to be fair. It's never fair. The best you can do is hope that when it's not fair for you, it's fair for them. And that when it's not fair for them, it's fair for you, so that you can take care of each other. That's really the best that it gets. But we don't think that way when it comes to our relationship with God. And so we just I really think we leave a lot on the table. I think we miss moves of God because we're so busy wishing that it was like it is for me, like it is for you. Does that make sense? Yeah. So Luke chapter 18 is this parable that Jesus tells. We're going to start in verse 9. To some who are confident of their own righteousness and look down on everyone else, Jesus told this parable. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I'm not like the other people, the robbers, the evildoers, the adulterers, or even that tax collector. I fast twice a week and give 1/10 of all I get. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all those who humble themselves will be exalted. There's this thing that we do where we want to be like other people. And Jesus is obviously speaking. He's speaking, it says that he's speaking to the people who think highly of themselves. But he's the disciples are there at least, right? There's people around. And if he's saying that to us, like maybe you are somebody who thinks too highly of yourself, and you walk around and you're like, well, at least I'm not like that. Right? At least I'm not like that. Then that's what he has to say to you, is that even the people that nobody likes are better than you in God's eyes. That's uncomfortable, but that's what he said. Right? But then you also have what I think, what I think is probably a little bit more normal, which is people who walk around seeing the people who think highly of themselves and wishing they could be more like that. Right? And it's the world's we can kind of be monkey see, monkey do. You know what I'm saying? That's why all the clothes right now are some weird combination of 80s and 90s. That's what's in fashion at the moment. I think I wear the same thing every day. But we see something and we're like, oh, okay. And then we see it enough and we're like, I need to buy a whole new wardrobe. Or it's why we all aspire to similar things in life. It's why they can make cookie cutter houses and people buy them for way too much money, right? And so we can tend to be that way. And when we get to be that way in our spiritual lives, we mess it up. I mean, God knows He knows how many hairs are on your head. Like, He formed you in your mother's womb. Like, He knows you, right? Why would you expect a God that knows you with that level of intimacy to treat you like He treats the person next to you? That would be wrong. If you're sitting next to your child and then you're sitting next to a stranger on the other side, why are you ever going to treat your child like the stranger? Even if the stranger's wearing fancy clothes, and I want you to be like that. But somehow we seem to think that God operates that way in our walk with Him. The next story is Zaccheus. I know this is a weird take on Zaccheus, but we'll keep moving. 19, verse 1 through 10. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zaccheus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed up a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said, "Zaccheus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He's gone to the house of a sinner." But Zaccheus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." So, in the parable, you have what probably everybody around is aspiring to be, the Pharisee, right? They want to be like that. In the society of the time, the Pharisees that's who you want to be. They were a combination of a pastor and a lawyer and a politician, and they were seen highly in society, and they were smart, and they knew everything you needed to know, and they had the position, and like you would look at your children and say, "I want you to be that one day," right? And then you have a tax collector. The tax collector, I mean, he's a tax collector. Nobody likes paying taxes, right? Could you imagine having the job like if a tax collector nowadays was a person who had a booth and it was their job to tell you what your tax bill was? Would you like that person? Now add on to it, on top of the fact that they could throw in extra fees that weren't in the table. They could just be like, here you go. And that's how these guys got rich, is they were locals who worked for the Roman government, right? And then they could add on little stuff here and there, and they would take your money. That would be a contentious thing even now, right? That's why you send a check to something without a face, right? Now add on top of that for Zaccheus, right? Zaccheus, not only is he not a Pharisee, not only is he a tax collector, he's a chief tax collector. The man runs the racket. Like every mob boss you've seen in every mob movie, just put that face on Zaccheus. Only make him short, so like Joe Pesci. Y'all with me? All right, Joe Pesci playing Zaccheus. All right? And Jesus is coming to town. Right? This is somebody that they all would have hated. This is somebody that they all would have felt stole from them. This is somebody who Jesus should not hang out with, period. Just shouldn't. It doesn't look good. You don't want to be seen with him. Now, Jesus makes a habit of hanging out with people like that. He hangs out with the Samaritan woman. He hangs out, he hangs out with a prostitute. He has a tax collector in his posse, right? In his entourage. One of them's a tax collector, Matthew, right? he hangs out with these fishermen, these blue collar guys, and the theory is that Peter and some of the other fishermen, they would have been guys who washed out in rabbi school, so they were dropouts, right? They were blue collar dropouts. Like Jesus makes a habit of hanging out with those kind of people, right? And yet, like, we still have this thing where even now we'll be like, but you need to be like that. You need to be like, well, what in our modern day would be the Pharisees, right? There's a position you need to aspire to. There's a type of person you need to be. I mean, now, even in churches, like I can't tell you how many times we had this pastor when I was working on the plate. His name was Pastor Aaron. Pastor Aaron's like, gosh, he's in his early 80s now. He was. I think he got a plaque for 55 years in ministry. The dude was a pastor for 55 years, and he was with us at New Life for like about 20. And I can't tell you how many times you'd have people come up to him, and they'd have just this glowing, they'd have this reverence for him and this glowing opinion of what type of person he might be, right? And like, he's awesome. But even he would tell you, like, you don't need to be me. You don't need to be like me. You need to be like Jesus. And you don't need to hear from God the way I hear from God, right? But we don't think that way. We see people we admire and we try to emulate them. And Jesus he's trying to break that, and then he's also trying to show the redemptive power. And so let me just say this: he's hanging out with, or he's walking in, and he sees Zaccheus up in the tree. Okay, now I would imagine that this is not the first time that Jesus has walked by somebody who climbed a tree to be able to see him. That makes sense to you? Like, he just fed 10,000 people on the side of a hill in the middle of nowhere that sought him out and did not bring lunch. He's probably had people climb a tree to see him. Make sense? Y'all good? But he sees Zaccheus, and Jesus knows what's going on here. He would know that Zaccheus his heart is open to what's going on. And so he takes the time to stop and speak to him, because being God, he knows his heart. So he stops and he says, hey, come down. I need to go to your house. He invites himself over for dinner. Jesus is really good at doing non-polite things around dinner. We talked about that last week. I'm coming to your house for dinner. I hope you cook something good. Right? The first thing I will say is this: he sees your effort. I think in the midst of all the comparing and in the midst of all of the I should be like that, we think that the things that we do aren't working. But I think more often than not, what's happening is you are seeking out God and wanting him to answer the way he answered your friend. You are seeking out God and wanting him to answer the way he answered your spouse. You are seeking out God and wanting him to move the way he moved last time. And at some point, like you just gotta accept the fact that you have a relationship with him that's unique to you and him. Right? Yeah. I think a lot of times that's hard to do, man. That's hard to do. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a place in life where I've never been here before. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not comfortable. And so what do? I turn and I look to things, I reference things, I ask people for help, I ask for their opinions, I ask for everything else. And I'm not saying that those things aren't helpful. They're very helpful, but they're not the end all be all. The end all be all is what God does and what God says. And so I gotta wait on him. Right? The comparison game will mess you up if you feel like you're not hearing from him and you're trying real hard. Right? So Jesus sees Zaccheus and he sees his effort to even be able to see him, and he sees his heart. So he honors that. He says, I'm coming to your house. And the immediate reaction is, I can't snap loud. Anyway, distracted myself. The immediate reaction is, oh, Jesus is going to a sinner's house. Worse than that, it's probably more like this. Oh, Jesus is going to that tax collector's house. He steals everybody's money. I bet you Jesus is trying to get him some money. That sounds like church today, right? Yep. Oh, preacher's just trying to get money, right? That's probably where they're going. And so he goes to his house, and that's the immediate reaction. And then Zaccheus' reaction, because he knows what everybody's doing, what everybody's saying, is, hey, I know who I am, but I want to make it right. The second thing is this: he sees your sin anyway. I'm not saying that to beat you up. I'm saying, what you hiding it for? Why are you hiding it? You think you can hide it from God? You think he doesn't know? Okay, so Lottie, Charlotte's, she's like, I don't know, gosh, her birthday's in February, so she's like, what, 20 months old, 19, something like that? 20, no, it's 24. She's 20 or 21 months old. Anyway, she's almost 2. That's way better. Should have just said that in the first place. So she's little, right? But this little girl, 2 things. She is a tornado. Like, everything, if she can take it apart, she's gonna take it apart. If it rips, she's gonna rip it. If it can be taken out of the box, it's coming out of the box and flying across the room. Like, that's the way she is. And I love her for it. Like, I see a lot of myself in that, because I would break things to try to put them back together. And I always had extra pieces. Like, she's a lot like that. And so I see her doing all this stuff. But the other thing that she is she can try to be sneaky. Like, but she's like almost 2. So she's really bad at it. Like, hilariously bad at it. So last night we were sitting in the house, and we have this little, I don't know, like, it's like a shelf that has baskets on it. And the baskets, the bottom basket is the big basket. It's full of all the dog stuff. So it's got the leashes, the grooming kit that I never used, because the one time I used it, I made my dog look terrible. But $80 for a dog haircut, like, give me a break. Anyway, he gets his haircut like twice a year. Anyway, I gotta stay on track. So it's got the grooming kit, it's got the bags, you know, the little poopy bags? I hate those things, because the idea that I should clean up a dog's poop is just revolting to me. Anyway, it's called fertilizer. The poopy bags are the big thing. So my kids will get the poopy bags out, and they're all still attached. So it's like 80 feet of poop bags. But they unwound them, right? And so they'll take them and get them out and run around with them like they're little streamers. And like the whole house is filled with poop bags at some point. Like, it takes up the whole kitchen, because there's like 3 rolls. You can tell we just let our dog out in our yard. We don't walk him that much. And so, like, it's just everywhere. And so Amanda yells, no, put it away, because she didn't want to deal with the mess. And so Nora starts putting everything away, and Lottie is over there, and I see her digging and then looking over her shoulder, and digging and then looking over her shoulder. And I'm like, Lottie, come on. So I get up and I walk over, and I get down and I look her in the face, and I say, listen, put it away, or you're gonna get in trouble. Okay. And she starts putting it away, and then I stand up, and she senses me stand up, and she senses me stand up, peeks over her shoulder, pulls the drawer back out like I wasn't watching, right? And starts digging in there. I said, listen, you're gonna get spanking. 1, okay, and runs away, right? That's how we look to God when we try to hide our sins. Like, how dumb do we look? Like, he's the God, he created the universe. What are you gonna hide? I think more pointedly, what we actually do is try to hide them from ourselves. We try to be in denial about it, right? Look, here's the deal with sin. When you do it, repent of it, and then fix it. That's it. And you're like, yeah, but it's not that easy. No, it's not that easy. You got to do it a ton of times. But the worst thing you can do is minimize it, deny it, act like it didn't happen, hide it. Why do we live in denial about these things? We live in denial about these things because they diminish our view of ourselves. And if we diminish our view of ourselves, maybe we won't be worth God hearing from us. But he knows and still listens. He sees you trying to be sneaky and still has grace. That's the next thing. He sees your heart. Zaccheus is not a good person. Not only is he not liked, he was not a good person. He was the boss of the people who stole for a living. But his response was this: look, half of what I have I will give to the poor, and what I owe everyone, I will give them 4 times that. Now, Jesus saw Zaccheus' heart when he was still in the tree. But he gave Zaccheus the opportunity to turn, right? Now, unpack this for a second. In the parable, he compares the tax collector to the Pharisee. Then we move into a story about a tax collector a little while later. And Luke is supposed to be chronological. So these things, the parable about the tax collector is a reference point for the story with Zaccheus, right? Now, you go back, Pharisee, tax collector, okay? You have who we think we're supposed to be, and definitely how we're supposed to act. Like, let me not undersell that. The Pharisee is doing everything right. And the problem is God sees his heart. And his heart is wrong. His actions are correct and his heart is wrong. That's possible. Yep. Right? Now, the tax collector, the actions are wrong. Now, maybe they're not all wrong, but there's wrong actions, but there's a repentant heart there. Unpack this for just a second. God's grace is so big. God's grace is so big that knowing your intention, knowing your heart. So knowing your intention, that's the normal way people say it in everyday life, right? Knowing your intention will move him enough to forgive you when you mess up. They say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Kind of seems like Jesus said something different. Your heart is the deciding factor. Now, your heart has to be followed by better actions and has to be followed by true repentance. So there is something there, but your intentions, your heart can be right enough that it will overcome your deficiencies in God's eyes. So if that's true, and we believe that to be true of God, then why do we always have to act like we're better than we are to try to earn his ear? The beautiful thing about the story with Zaccheus is he didn't hide. He didn't hide at all. He was honest with himself and he was honest with God, and he made a change. I feel like more often than not what happens to us is we're in denial with ourselves. We're in denial with God, and nothing changes. But then we'll say we're living for him. The question I want to leave you with is, who are you really living for? Like, who are you really living for? It's a really simple question, and I think it's a really normal question in the Christian life. But I think it's one of those questions that's really simple and really normal, but it doesn't get enough attention. And if we were to self-examine over and over and over and over again over this question, I think we would just be better at loving Jesus and being loved by him. It's one of those that takes repetition after repetition after repetition to get it right. I think this is one of those questions that's constant on the path to holiness. Y'all following me? Like, who are you really living for? Because if you want God to treat you like he treats everybody else, and you want to see God move in the way he moves for everybody else, and you're denying what he's doing in your life because it doesn't look like what you've seen with everybody else, then are you living for yourself or are you living for everybody else? Like, I'll give you an example. I've always been a little bit insecure about, I think I said this a couple weeks ago, but it works. I've always been a little bit insecure during worship services, right? There's two pieces to it. As a pastor, I feel like in some ways when I'm standing down front during a worship service, I should lead. Does that make sense? Like, lead physically. I should do what I want to be emulated, right? So that means I should be standing up front, hands in the air, doing the whole thing. I don't do that. I don't like doing that. But I also sometimes feel like that's not okay. Does that make sense? And that's because I don't like doing it. It's not me. Like my relationship with God is pretty private, and I'm also just not. I mean, dude, I'm not that expressive of a person. I walked by 3 people earlier, and my face was just blank, and I forgot to say hi. Like, that's my normal. And I stopped and went, I'm really sorry. It's great to see you. Please forgive me. And they're like, you're fine. Just keep moving. You're awkward now, you know? And like, that's just me. I'm just not that way, right? And so if I were to do that, it would be a show. And I'm not saying that it's a show for everybody, because there are people who do that and it's genuine worship. And if you feel that way, you should do that. And if God moves in you that way, you should do that. We had a lady at the church in La Plata. She danced. I mean, flat danced every Sunday. She sat in the front row on the side in one of the chairs that didn't have a chair in front of her. That way she could move more. And it honored God. I'm just not that way. And so there's a part of me that's insecure because I see other people doing it, and I think that it's more meaningful when other people do it, but is it really? And if I do it, and I'm raising my hands, and I'm down on my face, and I'm doing all of this stuff, who am I living for? Am I honoring God, or am I seeking attention? Am I honoring God, or am I honoring your expectations? Right? So who are you living for? Who do you live to please? Can I pray with you? Yes. God, give us the confidence to be okay with what our relationship with you is supposed to be. And give us the desire to make it what it's supposed to be. Don't let us chase stuff just so that we look better. Don't let us compare and put ourselves down because we don't look the way we want to look. Don't let us spend our whole lives trying to please people and not you. Lord, place on our hearts the things that are meaningful. Place on our hearts the things that change things. Place on our hearts the things that actually move us closer to you. And help us push out the expectations that are just noise. Give us the courage to be honest with ourselves and with you. And don't let us live our whole lives chasing some picture we see as beautiful and you see as worthless. We love you and we thank you. Amen.